Good morning. This is the Sunday morning service. There was a slight mix up in who was supposed to be preaching today. So I'm going to fill in because I had extra stuff from my Sunday school lesson that I just skipped over. And I said, oh, I'll just say it now because I had all these extra things I could have spoken about. And I cut them out. And I said, this must be where God wanted me to use it. So for the 8 of you who are tuning in to this, we are going to be studying today um, how important it is to maintain our relationship with God and not turn it into a religion. And you say, what's the difference between relationship with God and religion? Isn't religion good? Don't we sing in that old time religion? And um, relationships are fresh and vital, and they happen organically, and they're new every morning, and you see your friend or your wife or your child and how you're doing today, and you discuss whatever is going on that day, and you talk about it, and you um, uh, religion is when you get up and just say the same thing and do the same thing over and over without any thought, without any sort of um, understanding that you need to be real. Could you imagine greeting your wife or your husband or your child every morning and just saying the exact same thing every morning, uh, and never and just going through the same motions, just doing the same thing. Now, certain we're going to eat food and certain things are going to do the same, but thinking that simply if I just say the same words, do the same things, that's good enough. The person's going to be like, no, you're just like a robot. And sometimes we treat that God that way. We just do the same things in the same way, say, as though that's pleasing to God, that He wants us just to go through the motions. Like there's a certain rehearsed script that He wants us to go through. And as long as we've done that, then we're good. No, God wants us to be real with Him. He wants us to come to Him as real people and bare our hearts, pour out our hearts before Him, and have a really real relationship with Him every day, right? And not just simply repeat the same things over and over. So, good morning, Tammy. Thanks for listening in. So, um, we're going to begin with those scriptures that I had cut out of the Sunday school lesson. What has happened is that Jacob has had this experience with God, and he's called the place that he's had this experience Beth El, which means house of God. Beth is Hebrew word for house, and El Hebrew word for God. So this is the house of God. He had this incredible experience there. And he was unaware that his grandfather had had the same experience in that same spot. And their relationships were fresh and new. Their experiences with God were like fresh and real. It later became religious in that it just became a place. Well, as long as you go there, it doesn't matter what you do or say, at least you're there. And then you can leave. And we treat church like that. Well, I went to church and I went home. And so God's pleased that I just showed up. No, God's only pleased if we show up and we really show up and we really are honest before Him and are vulnerable to Him and are listening to Him. If you're just a body that just shows up and then leaves, that's not a relationship that's going to be successful. In Genesis chapter 12, starting in verse 5, once God had spoken to Abraham and said, I'm God, and I want you just to trust me and start walking. It says, then Abraham took Sarah his wife and Lot his brother's son and all their possessions that they had gathered and the people whom they had acquired in Haran, which is in Syria, and they departed to go to the land of Canaan. So they didn't know where they were going. They just had to trust God. God does that sometimes because He wants us to totally just put our hand in His. I don't know where we're going, but I'm just trusting you. sometimes when we do know where we're going, we start to lead too much. Parents have to do that with kids. Slow down, wait for me. Because once they think, oh, I know where we're going, they want to just take off. It's like if you take off and I'm not right behind you, you might run into traffic. You might slow down more than you. And God says that to us, just slow down. I'm with you. Don't get out ahead of me. So sometimes to prevent us from getting out ahead of God, he doesn't tell us where we're going. That forces us to hold his hand, right? So Abraham's just walking. He's in the land of Canaan. It says, so they came to the land of Canaan. In verse 6, it says, Abraham passed through the land to the place of Shechem as far as the terebinth tree of Moreh. So he got to this incredible terebinth tree. These huge trees with all these leaves. You might see it in a horror movie or something. There's like, not that they're scary trees, but they're these huge trees, right? And the Canaanites were in the land. So he's thinking, is this where he wants me to stop? So he keeps walking a little farther and he finally stops. He says, then the Lord appeared to Abraham and said, to your descendants, I'm going to give this land. And how's that possible? It doesn't look like, how are you going to give me this land? And faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Faith is when you, okay, God, I'm just trusting you. I don't know how you're going to make this work, but I'm just trusting you, right? So to your descendants, I'm going to give this land. And there he built an altar to the Lord, who had appeared to him. And he moved from there to the mountains east of Bethel. And he pitched his tent with Bethel in the west and Ai on the east. So he was in Bethel, and then now he's going east of Bethel. Now, he didn't call it Bethel at the time. This is what it was later called by Jacob, but it's the same place. And there he built an altar to the Lord, and he called on the name of the Lord. So Jacob ending in at that same spot. So now this spot has become special to the Jews because Abraham had gotten there and Jacob was led there. So after they left Egypt and went into the promised land, they took the ark of God with them. They took the covenant of God that he had made on the mountain with Moses, and they thought, where are we going to leave it? Where would be a good place to drop off this ark of the covenant that we have with God and worship him? Where else? So it says in Judges chapter 20, verse 24, so the children of Israel approached the children of Benjamin. Oh, I'm so sorry. So they built an altar in Bethel because they thought, here's where God is. Now the truth is, God is everywhere, but he's okay if you designate a place, you know, like a church where we all come together and we worship him. He's cool with that as long as you come and you're real. If you just show up, he's not good with that. So they said, here's the perfect place to leave the Ark of the Covenant, right? Now, they knew that the tribe of Benjamin, there's 12 different tribes that have moved into the promised land. The tribe of Benjamin really acted up. I've taught on this before. They did terrible stuff. And the other 11 tribes said, the tribe of Benjamin, they need to be punished. So they just set out and they said, we're going to punish them. Did they go to Bethel and did they ask God, should we do this? Is it okay? When should we do it? Because when you should do it is just as bad as, this is important, it's should you do it? Because sometimes we get the okay from God and then we just go. And God's like, wait, you can slow down. It's okay, you can slow down. There's a time that I want you to do it. They didn't wait for, they went out and it's 11 tribes versus one, and that one beat the heck out of them. You know, what happened? So they tried it again on a second day. Again, there's 11 tribes. There's just one. 11 versus one. You imagine 11 people fighting one person, right? So it's 11 versus one. And it says, so on the second, so the children of Israel, this is Judges chapter 20, verse 24. So the children of Israel approached the children of Benjamin on the second day. And Benjamin went out against them from Gibeah on the second day and cut down to the ground and more of the children of Israel. And all these drew the sword, like it was a sword fight. They got 18,000 of them. The little tiny tribe of Benjamin is just killing them. So verse 26 of Judges chapter 20 says, then all the children of Israel, and that is all of the people, went up and came to the house of God, Bethel, and they wept. And they sat there before the Lord, and they fasted that day until evening, and they offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. So the children of Israel inquired of the Lord. And it says the ark of the covenant of God was there in those days. And Phinehas, who's the son of Eleazar, who's the son of Aaron, so this is Moses' brother. Moses' brother was Aaron. This is the grandson of Aaron. It says he stood before it in those days. He was the minister, he was the priest, saying, so they're talking to God, finally, shall I yet again go out to battle against the children of my brother Benjamin? Or shall I cease? Like, what should we do? Because they were bad and we know you want us to punish them. Should we go out or should we stop? And the Lord said, go up, for tomorrow I will deliver them. Now, they hadn't asked him what day before. They just knew we're supposed to do this, so let's do it. But they didn't say when. They just figured, well, okay, you gave us the go ahead, let's go. And sometimes you can be doing a wonderful thing for God, but you're just too early. And we don't want to wait. Ooh, I know what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to start this or start that or do that. And it can be your plan. We're going to go fast. But if God's not behind you, you better slow down. So when they prayed, God said, yeah, but it's tomorrow. You needed to have waited 3 days. You didn't wait at all. So at Bethel, at least they began to praise and worship God and go to him and inquire of him what they should do. Then in a Sunday school lesson, I was reading from Samuel, how Samuel also had anointed Saul king. And Saul's problem was also that he didn't listen to the Spirit of God. He just didn't, he just had his own plans, right? And they were good plans, but he wouldn't listen. So Samuel sends him up to Bethel, hoping that he'll learn the same lesson that Abraham learned, which is just keep your hand in mine and I'll lead you. That he was trying to teach Jacob, just trust me and I'll bring you back to this place. That he's trying to teach the children of Israel when they were fighting Benjamin, just ask me. God just wants to be consulted. Hello, I'm part of this. In fact, it's my plan. So until you know what my will is, how I want you to do it, and when I want you to do it, it's not going to work. All those three things have to be working together. So in 1 Samuel chapter 10, he says to Samuel, if you go up, some prophets will meet you at Bethel, basically. And verse 6 says, and then the Spirit of the Lord will come upon you, and you will prophesy with him and be turned into another man. And let it be when these signs come to you that you do as the occasion demands, that you do what God leads you to do. For God is with you, so make sure you don't do your own thing. He says, and then you shall go down before me to Gilgal, and surely I will come down to you. So go to Gilgal, and then I'll come down to you to offer burnt offerings and make sacrifices and peace offerings. 7 days you shall wait until I come to you and show you what you should do. So don't do anything for 7 days. And if you know this story, you know that when it got to day 7, he got anxious and he got nervous and he fought and he did all this stuff because he hadn't heard from the prophet. And then as soon as he had finished, the prophet showed up and said, what did you do? And he takes the kingdom from him. It's like, I'm sorry, you're not going to be king for very long because you don't know how to wait on God. That's a big lesson we have to learn. Okay, in 1 Kings, so Bethel's the place that we're supposed to go to learn to wait on God, to learn to not move before we got full instructions from him. In 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 28 through 32, it says, and Jeroboam said in his heart, so what has happened is now the kingdom is split in half. There are the people who are following Rehoboam and the people who are following Jeroboam. And they're supposed to follow Rehoboam even though he's stupid. They weren't supposed to follow Jeroboam even though he was the smart one. So Jeroboam said in his heart, now the kingdom may return to the house of David. They may go back down to Jerusalem and start worshiping, I've got most of the people on my side, but I don't have a place for them to worship. Because God at this temple to Jerusalem and said, now this is where I want you to worship. Not in Bethel. I want you to worship here in Jerusalem. So he's thinking, what am I going to do? I don't have the temple on my side. The temple's down there with those guys. I know. He says, verse 27, if these people go up to offer sacrifices in the house of the Lord at Jerusalem, then the heart of these people will turn back to their Lord. And Rehoboam, king of Judah, and they will kill me and go back to Rehoboam, king of Judah. I can't let them go back to Rehoboam. I need to stay with me. I'm Jeroboam. Therefore, the king asked advice and said, make 2 calves of gold. And he said to the people, it is too much for you to go all the way down to Jerusalem. Don't do what God said and go all the way down to Jerusalem. It's way far away. Here are your gods, O Israel, which brought you up from the land of Egypt. These calves, remember how you're falling off after these calves? It is too much for you to go to Jerusalem. Here are your gods, O Israel, which brought you up from the land of Egypt. And he set one up in Bethel, and the other one he put in Dan. So even though God had now given them different instructions, he says, I can trick them into going to Bethel because they had that great experience in Bethel, and this is what we've always done. We've always gone to Bethel, and even though God is doing something new, I can make them go back to Bethel. And so he did. He put calves there, says, and he made shrines on the high places and made priests from every class of people who were not the sons of Levi. Even though the sons of Levi had been called, he made his own class of priests. And Jeroboam ordained a feast on the 15th day of the 8th month, just like the feast that's one in Judah. We'll have our competing feast, and offered sacrifices on the altar. So he did at Bethel, sacrificing to the calves that he had made. And at Bethel, he installed the priests of the high places which he had made. And it says it became a sin. People were sinning because he says we'll use Bethel. Remember all this great stuff used to happen there? I can just recreate it. And even though God had moved on and said, nope, now I want you in Jerusalem, they're now using Bethel as a place to actually defy God. And we can do that sometimes, where God is wanting us to move on. And we're like, nope, I'm going to build my altar at Bethel. That's where all this started. And I'm not going to change. And I can just create that same experience. And God punished them for it and eventually destroyed them. Because you can't recreate a religious experience. It's not the same as having a relationship with God. We got to find where God is and do what he wants. We can't create our own religious experience and think it's a good substitute. In Amos chapter 3, verse 14, it says, in this day I will punish Israel for their transgressions. I will also visit destruction on the altars of Bethel. And the horns of the altar shall be cut off and fall to the ground. Now the horns, they had taken the horns of the calf and put them on the altar. So they'll be cut off and they're going to fall off. I know that people think they're doing something special by worshiping, but they're not worshiping in the way that I want them to worship. They're not doing what I want them to do, so it doesn't mean anything to me. And in Amos chapter 5, verse 4 through 5, it says, for thus says the Lord to the house of Israel, seek me and live, but do not seek Bethel, nor enter Gilgal, nor pass over to Beersheba. Don't go to all these other places where you think I'm at. Gilgal shall surely go into captivity, and Bethel shall come to nothing. Now, God had been at Bethel. It's not that God hadn't been there. He'd had an experience with Abraham there. He had experience with Jacob there. People had worshiped there. He'd given instruction. But now God was doing something new. Person. And if they're saying, hey, meet me over here, you can't say, but 4 years ago I met you there, so I'm going to wait for you over there. It's like, no, I'm over here. Well, I'm over here because that's where you were 4 years ago. And it worked 4 years ago. Doesn't matter what worked 4 years ago. Doesn't matter what worked 20 years ago. What is God speaking to us today? What is he telling us today? And that's the difference between having a relationship and having a religion, where you're just doing things that you think God's going to like, and you're clinging to the past and you're clinging to the old ways. There's a difference, because that's just having religion. And you can shout and you can do all the, But God's saying, no, a relationship with me is hearing my voice and obeying my voice and holding onto my hand. And wherever I'm taking you, you're ready to go. You're not dictating to me where I should meet you. God, meet us here. I'm telling you where you should meet me because I've moved on. I'm over here. And if we don't follow after him, if we don't go with him and meet him there, we will not make it. So that's our short lesson for today. We want to make sure that we are having a relationship with God, that we're always listening to him, that we're not getting so set in our old patterns and doing the same thing over and over. That has just become a religion that is empty. But we want a relation that's full of life. So thank you so much for tuning in. And next week, it'll be either James or Carlos, one of the two wonderful associate members uh, that we have. And the good news is that uh, we're set to reopen the church on May 2nd, the first Sunday in May. The church will be opening. Good Shepherd Baptist Church. We'll have Sunday school at 10 a.m. in the sanctuary, and then at 10:45, we will have an hour-long morning worship service, 10:45 to 11:45, and communion on May 2nd. That's the first Sunday in May. Good Shepherd will be open, but we'll be following all the protocols. You know, you have to wear a mask if you decide to come, and if not, you can still watch it on the Facebook. But if you want to fellowship, we'll be 6 feet apart, and we'll do all the things to keep everybody safe. But for some of us, it'll be great back to be inside the church and to be worshiping with God. All right, thank you so much for tuning in. God bless you, and we will see you next week, and we'll see you in person May 2nd at Good Shepherd. Thanks.